to every director and the high school, middle school principal. Take out $5 grand.
Is that better?
I don't care what you take.
Yeah, we can hear you fine. We have some other new
Put it in my hand.
external speakers we were going to use, but the speakers from the computer seem to be working for now. So since we're late, I think we'll get started. As long as you can hear us. Okay.
Yep, perfectly. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, this is much better from the last.
Yep, this is like a 4,000%
Step up.
upgrade right here.
Yeah. Get these speakers to work. So.
Thank you.
Sorry. Thanks.
I don't know what can she see of us?
It depends on whatever this computer's looking
Meg,
at.
what
So
can
if
you
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay.
I was waving at you.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was me. All right, so I think we are ready.
You're going into executive session.
We are, but I'm going to open and so we can go into executive. Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, January 3rd, 2019 regular meeting of the school committee. We have determined that we have need for an executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to school safety, and because having the discussion in an open meeting could compromise school safety protocol effectiveness. So at this time I would seek a motion to enter into executive session and then we will reconvene afterwards.
So moved.
So motion by Amanda, do we have a second? Second by Nina, and we'll do, because we have Meg participating remotely, we'll do a roll call vote for everything out here. So I'm going to start down.
Aye. Yes. Meg, what's your vote? Oh, sorry.
Meg, we're looking for a vote to enter into executive session.
Aye.
And I am also a yes, so we will go back into executive session and we will reconvene here in public session at the conclusion of that.
Should we mute this just in case?
So, good evening and welcome back. We are, oh, sorry. Good evening and welcome back to our Thursday, January 3rd.
Not yet.
Well, that was good. That was a couple of takes.
Wait, that's good because now I can hit. Oh. Is she on mute? Meg, are you on mute?
Can we unmute her?
I don't know how.
She has to do it.
Oh, you're good.
She's good.
Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, January 3rd, 2019 regular meeting of the school committee. We have just returned from executive session where we met for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to school safety, and because having the discussion in an open meeting could compromise school safety protocol effectiveness. I would ask people present in the audience to please rise to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll start out, if anybody has any recognitions before we dive into all of this. I don't know, I didn't have any on the,
I actually just have one.
okay,
So,
go right ahead.
And it just cropped up only a few hours ago. In going from 2018 to 2019, with payroll, they set new tax rates. And somehow, there were some issues with how the paychecks went out just recently, so that some paychecks went out short, $35, $200. And I just want to thank all of our partners on the town side for being able to rectify this in probably the next 48 hours. I think it's just really important that our people in January, post-holidays, are made whole. So thank you to them.
Thank you. So, any public comment? I don't know, we don't have a robust crowd, so we could come back to that if people come forward later. And we do not have student council reps right here. If they come, we will take that out of order down the road. And we will wait on the superintendent's budget recommendation for some of our other town partners, because we're a little bit ahead now. And move into the school committee chair report. And I have approved for payment the accounts payable warrants 19-062, 19-063, and 19-064. All warrants have been included in your packet. And I have approved for payment the payroll warrants S19013 and S19013A. Payroll warrants have been included in your packet. And then again, the school committee office hours we have not had since our last meeting, but I would like to try to set a time before the public hearing next week. We can probably do that offline, so I have a couple of dates I'll send around, and then we can hammer that out and hopefully get a listserv out before the end of the week. Are there liaison reports that people have?
I'll make a quick one. So the website subcommittee has not, sorry, I don't know what's happening there. It hasn't met, but I did want to let people know that Mr. Ghosh and his team have actually reached out to vendors who are now in the process of responding, and will be scheduling, I think mid-January. We have 2 dates that we're looking at to schedule vendor presentations. So the ball is rolling, and we are looking at, what our options are for the new district website. So.
Great.
I have none. It's kind of embarrassing.
Well, New Year and the holiday and all. Any for you? Okay, well, I guess that moves us into new business item A, which is the 2020, wow, that seems weird to say, 2020 International Travel, and it's just the intent to travel, Hopkinton High School, Europe, World History, Mr. Spiegel, and that's you.
Yes. So we have a request for your approval for students who are taking either world history, U.S. history, AP history, or facing history in ourselves. So students in those courses would be eligible, up to 40 students, to travel to Europe, places like London, Normandy, Paris, Munich, and they would be going on April vacation in 2020. They would be going with EF Tours, and we always use them for our trips. They're very reliable. And you can see in your packet, the ways in which that connects to the curriculum. And it's Mr. Spiegel who is sponsoring that tour. So we are looking for your approval.
One thing jumps out at me with respect to the fundraising, that I believe that EF Tours, and this is not noted on this one, but it is on a different one, has the ability to set up fundraising pages to help students with fundraising, and they also do have some scholarship money that is available for kids to apply to that should be noted in the material
Yes,
before it comes back for a final.
okay. Yep.
Other questions, comments? Anybody want to sign up to chaperone? I wish we could. Okay, then I would, if there are no questions, and
She shook her head.
she shook
She's
her head,
good.
yes or no? She's
Trying to
good?
keep track of
Okay.
you, Meg.
I would then seek a motion to approve this initial, approve the Hopkinton High School grades 10 to 12 intent to travel to Europe for April 17th through 26th, 2020.
So moved.
So motion by Jen.
Second.
Second by Mina, and we'll do a roll call vote because we have remote participation. So
Aye.
Amanda is, Meg,
Yes.
Aye.
and I am also a yes. So that is great, thank you. And then we can go down to item B, which is the 2020 International Travel Intent to Travel Hopkinton High School English, which is Miss Martin and Miss Breen.
Yes, Marie Martin and Samantha Breen would like to take students to a number of cities, Berlin, Prague, Krakow, Budapest. And you can also, again, see the connection to the curriculum in your packet. It looks like they are looking for anywhere between 12 and 30 students. And at this point, there are some of the pieces that still have to be determined. Let's see, the number of students and then the return, the departure and the return dates. It looks like those aren't there yet. You know, typically, those will come when EF Tours books the flight and the hotels and those things. So they usually have a rough sense of when they're going. And obviously, this is just for initial approval, and again, it's in 2020, so.
And the only thing that I want to note is that we are approving the potential in this intent for school to be missed, depending on the flights. It would not be a significant amount, but it might be.
Right.
And again, the same holds true about the fundraising. So
I think
would-
it's actually noted in this one.
I knew it was noted
Yeah,
in
it's
one
in
of them.
this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so then I would seek a motion to approve the 2020 International Travel Intent to Travel Hopkinton High School Europe English, Ms. Martin and Ms. Breen.
So moved.
Motion by Jen, second
Get a Meg.
by Meg. I see, I could see her that well. And we'll do a roll call vote again.
Aye.
Meg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so that's great. So I think at this point, we're ready to go back into the superintendent's budget recommendation, if that's,
Okay. Do you want to just do the ice hockey trip?
oh,
was
sorry,
one more.
I skipped over
I
that
think.
one. Yes, let's just do that just for, keep that.
Yeah, it'll just keep it going. Okay, so this one is a pretty easy one. It's just one single night. Overnight, the boys hockey team will be traveling to Martha's Vineyard. They will be, they have been invited to play in the 21st Annual Fairleigh Dickinson Hockey Tournament on the Vineyard. There are 3 chaperones, Chris McPherson, Scott O'Connor, and Paul Kirk. And it looks like they will be going on February vacation, leaving on the 16th and returning on the 17th.
Questions or comments on that?
No.
Okay, then I would seek a motion to approve the boys' ice hockey overnight travel to Martha's Vineyard for February 16th to 17th, 2019.
So moved.
Motion by Jen,
That's okay.
second
Second.
by Nina, and then a roll call vote. Amanda?
Aye.
Meg?
Yes.
Aye.
And I am also a yes, and so that also passes. And then we'll go over to you for our budget recommendation.
Budget, okay. So I've prepared a presentation for tonight to talk about the FY20 budget. As you know, we started out and let the principals just put everything on the table, things that, you know, were probably their greatest wishes. And at that point, we were at 9.9. I will give you the spoiler alert that right now we are at 6.67, but I will talk a lot about how we got to that place. So in the process of creating this budget, there were many things that were in fact important to us. As you know, we have really great academic and extracurricular programs in Hopkinton. And so one of the things that we all agreed on was that we had to maintain the level of excellence that we currently have. The curriculum and instruction that we are offering to kids needs to meet the needs of every learner. So students who, learn differently, students who are your highest achievers, students who struggle, students who need remediation, any child in the Hopkinton Public Schools should be getting what they need. We obviously needed to add a lot of teachers, and we had to add a lot of teachers in FY19 and in FY20 because we needed to accommodate increases in our student population. I know that I say this almost every time we meet, that we had about 200 more kids this year than we anticipated having. It was certainly a shock to our system, and I think that we've done really well this year bringing in the appropriate personnel so that we are offering kids good programming and just solid curriculum and instruction. We obviously have to work on our facilities. Some of those facilities are going to need a little bit of expansion space, but I also think that we continue to look at our facilities and think about where sort of intensive programs are going to be or silence labs are going to be, and so we try to maximize our learning space. We're constantly looking at student safety measures, so we have cameras in place. We meet very frequently with the school safety and town safety personnel, and all of that takes place. We will continue to build technology programming in FY20. There's not a whole lot of that going on, but we do in fact have, licensure to worry about, machines to upgrade, and this year Marathon Elementary School is actually one-to-one as well. Every student, in those classrooms, there are 20 iPads for every classroom. And finally, this budget does in fact support all of our school improvement plans. So along the way, there were some major challenges. Obviously, increasing enrollment was one of those challenges. I think I had been talking to members of the school committee several weeks ago, and I had said, we are in a very good place. We're probably about $75,000 away from hitting that 6.5 mark. And then we got some very bad news from Accept Transportation. One of the people who is what Susan Rothermick would call a market mover in our collaborative decided to step out of special education transportation for this year. And what that meant was all of the other districts who were remaining in the collaborative were going to have to pay a significantly higher cost for special education transportation in FY20. For some districts, that meant $400,000 added to their budget. For us here in Hopkinton, it was an additional $200,000, and it took us by surprise, and it probably happened to us within, I don't know, the last month. So it's been very hard to figure out how we were going to trim yet another $200,000 from the budget. When you open a new building, you know that costs are incurred with that process. So, for example, at Marathon, because there's so much more space, so much more open space, we are unsure at this point what heating costs are going to look like through this winter. So we're kind of, in that place where we've budgeted an amount. We're not sure if it's too high or if it's too low, but it's the best guess that we have right now. Obviously, we need more maintenance personnel in a building like that because the driveway is so much longer that we need people to remove snow in a much greater area. There's more grass to maintain, all of those things. And there were programs to create, so as much as we would like to say maybe we could keep status quo for a year, that's not feasible. The state has given us all new social studies standards, so when you get new social studies standards, we have civics that has moved into the 8th grade, and adjustments to be made at other grade levels. We have a new math program, K-5. And when we look at these new programs, part of the reason that happens is that we have licenses for textbooks, and when those licenses expire, we say, are we currently using the best product available? And if it's not the best product, then we go out and we look and we do an evaluation to see what it is that we want to adopt. Either way, we're paying for new textbooks. The question now becomes, how do we implement this new program and get teachers K-5 trained in a brand spanking new product? So those are just two quick examples. We have, because of our increase in student enrollment, we also have growing transportation needs. What that means now is that, and we talked about this a little bit last time we were together, is that we have hit bus number 29. We do have MAPT, which is the Mass Association of Pupil Transportation, coming in to do an audit for us. And for a very low fee, they will look to see if we are using our busing as efficiently as possible. So that's something that I think, is just good housekeeping, really. And then, of course, that we have unfunded mandates that we have to fulfill. So somewhere between our first presentation when we were at 9.9 and today when we are at 6.67, we had to go through sort of a lot of reductions and a lot of eliminations. And this is never easy. I can just tell you a little bit about how the process looked before we go through that bulleted list. But we have had one-to-one meetings with our building principals so that I'm sitting in the middle school or sitting in the high school or sitting at Hopkins with those principals and really talking about what their programs look like and what their personnel look like. But we have also corralled all 5 of our building principals and the 3 of us, Jen Parson, the assistant superintendent, and Susan, the business manager, in a room at central office. And we did that more than once, and when we get into that room, we're probably in there for 2, almost 3 hours. And it's never pretty, you know, and we're kind of taking a look at, are there places where we can move people? Are there different ways for us to sort of strategize around the people that we have now, and can we share them? Are there things you've asked for that they're just untenable? And that conversation goes on for a very long time. So while it might feel to the public like we were here several months ago looking at 9.9 and miraculously we're at 6.67, none of that has been miraculous. It's only come really through rolling up our sleeves and hard work and a lot of sweat and tears. So some of the things that are gone, and this is probably not the full complement of everything that is gone, but we did eliminate a 1.0 FTE that was asked for at the high school. Mrs. Parson had asked for a K-5 math coordinator, and at this point we're thinking about hiring somebody to do that at 0.5 as opposed to having a 1.0 FTE. We have eliminated a requested 1.0 FTE in special education. I know Dr. Zaleski was looking for a special educator at the high school, and we looked at teachers' caseloads there. The highest one for FY20 is 23. There are obviously some that are very low. But the reason that you get very low caseloads in special education is that it's somebody who runs a particular program. So if you run the 18 to 22 program or an intensive needs program, you're obviously just dealing with students, you know, that fall under that category on that umbrella. We have eliminated a 1.0 FTE maintenance worker. We eliminated 2 technology positions, and the 2 technology positions that we have eliminated are the requested webmaster and a technician. Let's see. We have reduced a 0.2 benefits coordinator request. So currently we have someone doing our benefits at 0.7, and we're hoping just to bring that person's role to 0.8 for next year. We had a reduction of support staff requests overall. We had 2.8 in support staff, and we have reduced that to 0.6. There has been attrition, and that's actually been really helpful to us in this process. And it's helpful to us in this process because as you look at those bullets in the gray box, one of the things that was really important was preserving people's jobs. And sometimes as people decide to retire or resign, we are able to move people into sort of vacant spaces where they may have not been able to continued their employment with the Hopkinton Public Schools. Retirements are also helpful in the sense that when someone retires, they've been around a very long time, they are paid at the top of the salary schedule. And in the event that you're able to replace that person with a lesser paid person because they're coming in at the very beginning of their career in teaching, that's a really sort of wonderful way to save money. And we are grateful to those people who have given all of this time to the Hopkinton Public Schools. I wouldn't want them to think otherwise. So we have restructured some personnel. We have had some very small reductions to our expense budgets. I think most of the people in central office and the secondary principals were able to shave $5,000 each. And we are also going to be able to use some Title III grant monies for our English language learners. So that will be helpful to us. All right, so talking about some of the difficulties. And this may continue to be a difficult situation. So on October 4th, we have our October 1st SIMS data. You can see how many students were enrolled in the Hopkinton Public Schools. We were at 3,740. The day school began, we were at 3,721. And currently we're at 3,756. So since the very first day of school, we've had 35 new students come into the district. And that was as of December 20th. Interestingly, I think since we got back to school, we've already had 3 more kids join the district. So at the bottom, in the call-out box where it says our anticipated growth between now and next year is 103 students, we've already gotten 3 of those. So we're looking at 100 kids. Full disclosure, this entire budget is built on those 100 students coming into this district. And it's also built, and this might be the most important thing I say this evening, it's also built on the even distribution of those 100 kids. So across all of our grade levels, if we get 7, 8, 9 kids in each one of the grade levels, we're going to be fine. We have the plan to absorb those children into each one of the grade levels. You'll remember that this year we had surprise grade levels. In kindergarten, we had 64 unanticipated kids. In grade 6, grade 8, grade 9, we had great big numbers. So much so that we actually had a whole class worth, like 30 students in grade 6. That's an awful lot of students. If we see that same phenomenon again this year, we are going to be back to this table thinking about how we are going to acquire more staffing to be able to accommodate kids in those grade levels. So that 100 or 103 or wherever that number sort of is fluctuating today, that's a really important number to us. The last column on this is the NESDEC projections, and even NESDEC at this point does not really know into what grade levels students are going to land. So when you have 100 kids coming into your district, even distribution is the goal. This is what they are predicting. And you know that we have also worked with Beth DeLeva, who has a business in town that sort of allows her to see who's moving into the community. And I think that when we talked about her numbers, they're probably not so far off. I'll go to this slide first, just because it will sort of help you see those numbers. If we take a look at the numbers that are based on developments in the community, in column E, you can see the estimated occupancy by June 2019. And what we've done, where you see the yellow bar at the top, is we have taken out any of the age-restricted housing. So that has been taken off, and it comes down to 132 single-family or condominium units that will be available prior to or by June of 2019. What that means is you would have 132 students if you had only 1 child on average coming from every one of those households. In the previous slide, I had illustrated that 35 kids are already here. 100 kids are our guesstimate for coming in. If that number doesn't sustain, that we have more than on average 1 child, then again we'll be back to this table thinking about how we can increase our staffing. If we had 2 children, for example, you'd be at 264 kids. So how does that enrollment growth translate to our need for FTEs, or full-time educators? Every time 20 kids come into the district, it takes about 1.4 teachers to teach those kids. So when we looked at the number of sort of surprise students we had this year, we had 50 we were counting on, and we had 139 we hadn't been counting on. So if I round that up to 140, we have 7 groups of 20. So what we needed really in this year, in FY19, to accommodate that growth would have been about 9.8 full-time teachers. And that can mean a 2nd grade teacher, it could mean a special educator, it could mean a librarian, it could mean an art teacher. So when you get a 2nd grade teacher, we also have to figure that that kid's going to specials and may need remedial services. And so every single thing that you see there, it's about 1.4 FTEs. So the budget that you see here tonight was built on our 18-19 numbers plus the 103 kids. Now, this is one of those slides that I think is also important for taxpayers to be able to see, because I know how much the school budget costs the town as a whole, right? In most communities, the school budget takes up the majority of the town's budget. And Hopkinton is no different. But if you take a look at some of those very top communities, and these are the per pupil expenditures, and they came from the DESE website, and they are the 2017 per pupil expenditures. districts like Weston and Dover are paying somewhere around $20,000 per student. Weston, obviously close to $24,000 a student. Here in Hopkinton, we are still at like $14,500. So I think that families here are really getting a whole lot of educational bang for their buck. We do an awful lot. Really it's, I think, our classroom teachers who are exceptional instructors that get us to a place where our kids are so high achieving on, sort of a very modest, I would say, per pupil expenditure. So that's a lovely slide right there. And the other thing that I think about those numbers right there, those are the 2017 numbers. If we looked at the FY19 numbers, those numbers could actually go down given the vast amount of kids that we have absorbed this year with so few faculty additions. And just to sort of show you that, we really are doing a pretty good job with our kids. In any one of those cells that is colored green, our students, according to MCAS rankings, are in the 95th percentile or better. So third grade at Elmwood for ELA was 97, fifth grade at Hopkins, 95. Math at the middle school in grades 6, 7, 8 were 96, 96, and 99. The eighth grade being in the 99th percentile for math is an amazing score, absolutely amazing. And then you can see that the white is anything that is in the 90th to 94th percentile. So that would be grades 4, 6, and 8 in ELA, and grades 3 and 5 in math. And then we have those two boxes up there that are colored peach, and those are the ones that fall into the 80 to 89 percentile. When Mrs. Parsons says that she feels like we would be well served to get ourselves a K-5 math specialist, you can sort of see some of the data there that's helping with that. And you know that Mr. Keller has talked about adding reading across the 6th grade so that every student now gets reading instruction still in the 6th grade, which should hopefully help with the 83% in 7th grade. So I think that one of the things that this slide also illustrates is not how well we're doing, but how we are taking our budget dollars and trying to apply them wisely in places where we see need for student growth and achievement. All right, and then, I always like to show our Hopkinton High School accolades. You can read through all of those, but we are 18th statewide in the SAT for reading and math. 89% of our students earn a passing score of 3, 4, or 5 on over 1,100 AP tests. That is an enormous number of AP tests taken here, and those are darn good scores. 100% of our students earned proficient or advanced in the ELA MCAS last year. 97% of our students earned proficient or advanced in the math MCAS in 2018. There were very few high schools named by the Commissioner of Education as schools of recognition, and Hopkinton High School was one of 4 of them. And then finally, Boston Magazine puts Hopkinton High School in the top 20%, but the top 20% among the best public high schools in Massachusetts for 2017. So there's an awful lot to be celebrated. All right.
Okay.
And now we get to the number portion of the show.
Now we get to the number portion. So with that said, as you know, back in September, we had received guidance in terms of what would work financially for the town for all departments, and the school, our guidance was a 6.5% increase. So we continue to march along to achieve that number. As you can see right now, we are at 6.67. There are still some budget items that are in play. For example, there are some out-of-district placements that Dr. Zaleski is working very hard with families that may change in our favor. And the other piece is that accept transportation assessment is still being discussed by the board at accept, because as you can see, that's a large number for a lot of these districts to absorb in one budget year. So we don't know if that will play out, but it's one of those numbers that's still up in the air. So.
And I think, just to be clear on that number, I don't think the number is going away, but it might be mitigated to some degree.
Right. Like 200,000 won't go away, but they may decide to, ease the burden by maybe everyone getting 10,000. So it's not going to be a huge change, but it is a number that could potentially change, so.
Oh, sorry. Forgot my job.
I should turn. So this slide is just one that we always show for illustration, really just to remind everybody that the budget is 80% salary. So as you can see, when we're making changes, a lot of times it does become personnel. As students come in, it's personnel that we're adding. And, you know, trying to meet guidance, typically it affects personnel. So while we did give a directive to pretty much level fund expenses across the board as you're, you know, looking for that zero-based, try not to, as you're building, you know, the direction was don't look for more. So that was a directive right off the bat. So, and again, that's just for illustrative purposes. As Dr. Kavanaugh spoke earlier in terms of what has happened during this year. So the increases that we have had to add in FY19, that will be carried over into FY20. At the secondary level, there were 4.6 FTEs. There were 2 EL English learner FTEs, 1 campus aide. Special education paraprofessionals has been 6. We've actually reduced 1 learning specialist at 0.5, and the teacher for visually impaired is increased by 0.3. Library increased by 1.0, with a corresponding reduction of library assistant at 1.1. So what you don't see in here are positions that were added this year that are not being carried forward into FY20. As a, for instance, we added regular education paraprofessionals to Marathon. Started with 4, just coming into a new building, class sizes were increasing dramatically, so that sharing of 1 paraprofessional to 2 classrooms was not working. So we added those 4 right off the bat coming in. 1 in a couple months was already reduced and switched to a special education paraprofessional. So we went from the 4 regular ed down to 3. But none of those 3 regular education kindergarten are carried forward. That's why you don't see those here. So the only ones you see here are the ones that are being carried forward. Okay? So the personnel that are being added in FY20 is 1.6 elementary teachers, 1.0 secondary teachers, 0.5 adjustment counselor, 5 special education paraprofessionals, 1.5 math and ELA coordinator / coach, 0.5 secondary nurse, 0.5 elementary library, a 0.6 administrative assistants, maintenance 1.0, and a benefits coordinator at 0.1. And just as a reminder, as a for instance, at the elementary level, that increases at the Marathon. So that consists of 1 first grade teacher, but then you get at the related 0.05 of music, 0.45 of art, 0.1 of wellness. So it gets back to that kind of 1.4 teachers for groups of students, just to give you an idea. All the other positions, you have heard the presentations from the buildings as to those needs. And again, some of those needs have been cut back from that earlier slide. You can see where, as a for instance, the secondary teacher request was 2. All that's being put forward is 1. Okay.
And I think something interesting to point out there is just the 0.5 secondary nurse. You know, when you start to see a 0.5 secondary nurse, it's just because of the increase in student enrollment.
Correct.
There are so many students now that we actually need an additional half-time nurse.
The personnel decreases, so as we, you know, continue to constantly look at not only what is needed, but how can we restructure. So if, you know, if we can look district-wide at that district-wide level and move staff around, what can we gain to be able to absorb this? So the decreases will be the 1.0 literacy coach, half of a cut to an assistant principal, the library at middle school at 0.3, We are reducing a guidance secretary from 12-month to a 10-month position. We're reducing one English language learner teacher, and again, using that grant money, the tutor. So again, just a different structure to trying to achieve those same goals. Reduction of a special education learning specialist and a special education coach. And again, these are all, hard decisions, but we have to continue to move forward to what the guidance is, being able to make things work, but also still trying to keep the cuts away from students and really focus on direct student instruction.
Mr. Automic, the ones that you just shared, so these are ones which we already have, or are these adjustments from what was proposed?
These are positions that we already have.
And where is the literacy coach? At what grade level?
So that is,
Elementary.
so that is that restructure that we talked about of putting in place the coordinator, the ELA coordinator, and really looking at that K-5 curriculum alignment. So this is, again, a different model to bring about better, a different structure.
Thank you.
So this is just taking all those slides and putting them together into one slide, just to give you an idea of a one snapshot. Basically the same thing of what you just saw in those previous slides.
So given the increases in FY19 and the decreases in FY19, the total is about 750,000, and given the increases in FY20 and the decreases, it's about 424,000, so 425.
Then the last piece, of course, are the changes in expenses. And again, the message was, where possible, to level fund. Where you are stuck, of course, are contractual obligations. So you can see technology, the increase was minimal. Central office, that increase really is transportation. You have a $60,000 contractual increase and the addition of a bus. Most of our buses, especially at the middle school, high school level, are at capacity. The original, what we had originally put in the budget was 2 buses. So we're taking a chance and we pulled one back. Curriculum, as you heard Ms. Parsons discuss, was the textbooks for 6th through 8th math and 8th grade civics. Athletics, that is really the contractual obligations for transportation, and what you heard Ms. King talk about was just the increase in number of games, because all our teams are now getting to post-season. The number of games have increased, and that's a contract in terms of what we have to pay for the transportation, and the officials comes from the MIAA. Regular education, again, each of the buildings did a great job in really kind of holding the line in terms of what their increases were. What you really see were changes where they needed to buy furniture for classrooms. So as we look to get creative with space, you need to outfit them with furniture. And that's really where you see a majority, that's really a majority of what that increase is. Building and grounds, what we talked about again was the utilities. So in this year, we used a one-time rebate that was transferred to salaries. So again, that utility cost didn't go away. We just were able to use that rebate. And again, we increased the estimate for gas for Marathon because it is something that we still don't have any experience on. So while that is, an estimate, and it's something that we'll continue to monitor. Extraordinary maintenance, as you remember last year in 19, we pulled a lot of our extraordinary maintenance out and we put it in the capital plan. And that was advised by the town manager. Not that these extraordinary maintenance projects go away, they continue on an annual basis. So that's what these, that increase reflects what is needed for next year, such as water testing, replacing bubblers that are not working, the concrete entrance to the middle school that is crumbling. So all of these are things that need to be addressed. And also in there is the increase in rent for central office. So again, contractual. Occupational day, we're just seeing increase in enrollment. That's what that number reflects. Special education, this one again gets a little bit, just to remind everybody that we did a transfer to salaries of $300,000 of that prepaid transportation. So again, that transportation number didn't go away, but we were able to move that prepaid up to salaries. So that number is part of that increase. While it looks, it's deceiving, I will say. And then we talked about the assessment increase of over 200,000, tuition increase of 183,000, and assistive technology was an increase of 11,000. Our homeless transportation was another increase of 15,000. So there are a lot of pieces to that, but again, you know, a big piece of that is that chunk of prepaid that was transferred to salary.
Ms. Rothamich, what is the occupational day?
That are kids that go to Norfolk Aggie, Keefe Tech.
Why is it called occupational day? Just curious.
What the state calls it. Vocational education.
Thank you.
Mr. Rothenberg, when we're looking at the athletics or the buildings and grounds budget expense numbers, was there any offset from the current turf field, from rental income that might come through the turf fields that might then apply? Do we budget that in? Like, I know with the buildings and grounds expense budget, when Mr. Pearson presented it, he said it had accounted for facilities use and I think parking fees that help offset that budget. So I was wondering if there was any similar projection now that we have the new facility.
So turf field is not part of the operational budget. So all the money that is raised through the turf rental is kept in that account for future replacement of turf fields.
Okay.
So that was not money that was ever meant for us to be used in an operational budget.
Okay. Thank you.
But usually, any rental fees that we may be getting through our facilities, where is that kept?
So that is. So regular building rental, we have an offset in there of 100,000.
I see, but just for turf fields, we have a...
Turf fields is completely separate.
Because of the phases that we have set up, is that the reason?
So it was an agreement, and that was how it was put together at town meeting.
Okay.
So it's a cooperative agreement between Park and Rec and the school department in terms of running and maintaining and future replacement of that field. So all the revenue is to be in that special revenue account. It is not to be used for the operational school budget, and it is not to be used for the operations of Park and Rec. So it is strictly earmarked for the future of that field.
Thank you. How far off are we from a dollar number with the 6.5 recommendation?
So we're about $75,000 away.
What was your question? Sorry.
I was just asking about the dollar number. How much did you say?
About 75,000.
Okay. Thank you.
But if I'm understanding correctly, some of that 75,000 may come back to narrow the gap a little bit through either the negotiations regarding the collaborative, and also some, if we have any of our out-of-district students who may come back in district, we could appreciate some of that savings there. So we
Correct. So
hypothetically could end up at 6.5.
We could
May
end
not.
up at 6.5. I would hesitate to make additional cuts, whether it would be staffing or to expenses, if we can answer that. And we have an obligation according to, what the school committee needs to do in order to have their public hearing and vote to move forward where we are. Things will continue to evolve as they do. So we'll hope that things continue to work financially in our favor.
Is there a timeline for the Accept Collaborative to figure out what they're gonna do for the 4 schools that are still left in there?
There is not a timeline, so at this point in time, where we are is where we are. It would be for them to come together and make a decision on any type of mitigation. Now, keep in mind, the Accept Collaborative is several school districts, but only a portion of those school districts use the transportation. So any type of mitigation that they want to do from other financial resources would be of concern of the districts that do not use transportation. So it would have to be a collaborative vote to decide that that is the direction they would like to go. And there really is no guarantee, and you can understand both sides of the story.
Yeah, I think we last met with them on December 18th.
Sorry.
Dr. Zaleski, Mrs. Rodmick, and I. And I think at that point, they had given the superintendent in Dan Gutekunst, Needham, the charge of coming up with sort of a master plan, but there was no official timeline.
I think Meg has a question. You're on, Meg.
I hope you can hear me okay. So I noticed that the
We
grade
need to
Can we
increase the
turn it up a
volume.
little bit, please? Well, we're having trouble hearing you, Meg.
One sec.
can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Is in special education. And so I'm curious if the number of special ed students has dropped, or what is it that allows us to decrease that number? I mean, we're increasing paraprofessionals, but that's very different from a learning specialist or a SPED coach or a literacy coach.
So I can speak to that. The paraprofessionals who have been added, they have been added because a student has a requirement on his or her IEP that says that they have to have a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 situation with a paraprofessional. So that's why we have added those in FY19, and in FY20, what we're looking at are the number of students who are in sort of intensive special needs programs to some degree. So some of them are those programs. So for example, if there's a teacher who is in the intensive special needs program and has, I don't know, 6 or 7 students there, it may warrant the addition of a para. So we're just looking at those numbers there. But the actual teachers, when we eliminated the special education coaching position, that person will go back into the classroom as a teacher. What has happened as we have looked at the teacher to student ratio at the elementary levels, so for example, at Marathon, Elmwood, and Hopkins, we have had a couple of resignations, one of which we haven't been able to fill. And when we had that resignation in the K-1 building without being able to fill that position, I mean, it's been posted for several months, but at that point in time, the special educators there were able to absorb the caseload of the 0.5 FTE who resigned. So a 0.5 position is being eliminated for next year at Marathon because we feel like we have enough special education teachers in that building to be able to accommodate the number of students on IEPs. And of course, we are monitoring that. I mean, obviously, if you have an IEP that dictates that you have a particular number of minutes of services every single day, I mean, obviously, we would never be out of compliance. And then the same thing is also true at Elmwood and Hopkins. We have had a resignation at Elmwood, and through restructuring, what that would mean is there would be a 0.5 reduction at Elmwood and a 0.5 reduction at Hopkins.
Thank you.
So the other piece, you know, as we've had discussions, you know, not only with the building principals, but also with the town manager and, you know, the Board of Selectmen, the other side to this equation, as we lay people off, is the unemployment. So we're being cognizant of that as well. So if we have a resignation and we feel we can restructure, it doesn't also then cost the town on the other side in terms of unemployment. So it's, you know, this is kind of a win-win without being a win-win. So if we can figure out a way to make it work, rather than have a list of layoffs at the end of the year, it's a better way to move forward.
I have one other question, kind of along those lines. So you mentioned that we're not carrying forward some of the kindergarten paraprofessionals who were brought on this year. So I don't know how to ask this delicately, so I'll just put it out there. So next year, we're going to have kindergarten teachers without a paraprofessional. Will then there be a need to find paraprofessionals next year, given the class sizes that are going to be, one teacher to 22 kids or 23 kindergartners? So we're not carrying forward this year, but are we going to then need to rehire them next year once we figure out how many kids we have?
So when we went into FY19, the thinking was that we would have one paraprofessional for every 2 classrooms,
Right.
and we would be able to share them. With the additional 64 kids in kindergarten, we felt like we had 2 choices. We could either bring on another teacher to lower class sizes, or as opposed to totally dismantling the schedule and moving kids out of classrooms where they had already been assigned, it might have just been easier to add those 4 paraprofessionals, gen ed paraprofessionals. So that got us to almost equal, right? So the other piece that was, I think, pretty convincing was the fact that we had people who were going to be in a building for the first time and dismissed from that building for the first time, and there would be arrival, and kids would be wandering around a very unfamiliar place. So, we thought bringing in those paraprofessionals was wise, and this year it's our goal to meet that same target of going in with 1 paraprofessional for every 2 teachers again. And some of the, I guess, things that will be a little bit easier this year is the fact that now we know how to do dismissal, we know how to do arrival, the kids are familiar with the building. If we can sustain class sizes where they are, we will hopefully not be at 22 and 23, but as you know from this year, there is no guarantee of what class sizes are going to look like, especially in those funny class areas like kindergarten, grade 6, grade 8, grade 9, right? Those are just the difficult ones.
Do we have projections? I know that it's really hard to project class sizes given that we don't know where our big hits are going to come or if it's going to be evenly spread. Are we anticipating class sizes smaller than what they are currently in next year's K?
Yes. So what NESDEC has done this time around, and I think that it has been, I hope that it will prove helpful, they worked very closely with Connor Deegan. And what Connor showed them was the census data for 4-year-olds over 10 years. And then what we looked at was we compared the census data for 4-year-olds over 10 years with the number of students who actually enrolled in kindergarten in Hopkinton. And consistently, it was somewhere around 80%. So that was sort of helpful data, so that if we realized we had 80 kids who were on the census, then 100 kids showed up in our classrooms. So this year, the number that we have is based on that census data. Hopefully it will hold, but at the same time, it's hard to say, given the slide that shows you how many residences will be ready for occupancy by June of 2019.
Best guess.
That's right. We really are just working with best guesses. We've applied a little bit of science, as much science as we think we can to it.
I wanted to, before I rush ahead, are there more questions on the presentation from our side here?
No.
Okay. Then I do want to invite our partners from the town, if you guys want to have questions or if you want to come up to discuss any of it in more detail. You want to come up, Claire? Oh, sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. I thought you were raising your hand.
I don't feel the need to come up. I appreciate all you've done.
Thank you.
I would say being able to cut some of those positions, although they show up on their budget, they also show up on the town side for benefits, so it's nice that we're not having to deal with that, and then they would just incrementally increase as these positions stay on, so we're not able to reduce some of those positions from the initial proposals.
If there's more you want to.
No, the last thing that I will say, and I'm not sure if they're watching, but I would like to thank all of our building principals and all of the directors. It was a grueling budget season, and we've all come out on the other side, and we might be a little worse for the wear, but I think that they've worked really hard, and I want to thank them. They've been amazing.
Likewise, I want to thank you and your entire team for putting a lot of elbow grease in here, and I know you guys were working right through the new year, right up until the last possible second to get the best numbers we can and to get it as low as we possibly can. I know that our teachers and our personnel are our greatest asset. I appreciate the effort that went into preserving our current people without having to turn over, and the creative look at restructuring things where possible. So.
I just want to echo that too, and just say that when you look at like the slide with the personnel decreases for this year, and you see a principal giving up part of an assistant principal, and you see another principal giving up a guidance secretary that's kind of shared with the office secretary, it says so much about, I think, our administration and the way they keep children at the center, and I think you've worked really hard to protect children-facing positions, and I just commend you on that, finding the efficiencies and doing this difficult work over the last month or so. Thank you, and thank you to your staff.
Yeah, they're great.
It shows.
And for finding the Title III funding to help with some of that. I know that's always nice to be able to have some. No, but that's, I will say when we first started out, before we looked at how many kids were coming in and the challenges of the enrollment, the challenges of the Accept Collaborative, it seemed in the beginning like 6.5 would be much easier to hit than it turned out to be. And it looked, a month and a half ago, like it would take moving mountains, which essentially you did, to get us down to where we are now. So kudos to all of you. And then our next step for people who are watching along is we will have a public hearing next week, next Thursday, here. So that will, and then we will have another week before we will look at all the feedback we have received and look at the recommendations that have been made and vote to advance our budget to the town manager's office.
Yes. If anyone is interested in the stepping stones to get us
Yes.
all the way to
Thank
town
you.
meeting, when we post this, you'll be able to see it.
I just have, similar thoughts. This is the first year, Dr. Kavanaugh, that you're presenting this along with a fairly new team. Last year was my first budget season, and I come to realize in the past year and a half that I've been on this board that this is not easy. It's a complex job, understanding the needs of our learners and trying to meet them. I see, requests for on one end with regard to safety, on another end towards travel, international travel. We see English language learners, we see special needs, we see children who are, who are advanced learners, if you will, all kinds of needs. And keeping all of that in mind and presenting a budget is not easy, especially with a lot of unknown. And I know you're placing a lot of faith again in NESDEC. I wouldn't. But I think it's not easy, is what I have come to realize. So I appreciate very much what you have done along with your team. I'm also very thankful to our town, our taxpayers, for their generous 6.5% increase. This is not the case in many towns. So very, very thankful to them for that. Of course, the growth is one of the reasons why we are getting to where we are getting. But hopefully we will continue the quality education that we provide in our district through the support of quality leadership and quality teachers. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all. I think we're ready to
We are ready.
to segue into our next item of business, which is item D under the new business, which is solar opportunities with Ms. Rotherham.
Thank you. So as we continue to march along budget issues, we've been approached with two opportunities for solar. As anything we can do to reduce things and expenses that don't touch students is a great opportunity. So one of those is to add additional panels to the Marathon building, As you know, as part of the Marathon project, there is a small amount of solar panels on the roof that exist now. So this would be a proposal to look at the remaining roof areas and where else can we add additional solar panels, again, to offset our utilities. Another opportunity is to actually get into a net metering opportunity for a solar farm that will be built outside of the town of Hopkinton. And so we would be buying those net metering credits from solar that is produced off-site, and that again would help to offset our utilities.
Can you just, I had a little difficulty understanding some of the packet, I have to admit, on the solar. Do we have solar panels on the middle school still, or do we
We
remove?
have solar panels on the middle school and the high school.
Yeah.
The thing that you always want to bear in mind is when you put on solar panels, you want to understand what the age of your roof is. So Marathon being brand new and the roof being brand new is an opportune time, because then the life of your panels and the life of your roof coincide. So we do have some panels on part of the high school and part of the middle school. I would not look to add to those roofs or add panels to those roofs until we replace the roofs.
Right, no, I was more curious about what kind of agreement we have currently. So with the yield from those panels, what happens with that? Do we get credits? Is it more like the first option that you talked about,
It is.
where we get credits on our bill?
It is, yes.
Are they productive?
There's several ways to do solar, if you will. What exists now at Marathon, we own,
Yeah.
because it was purchased through the building project.
Okay.
A lot of times with solar, to avoid that capital outlay, you go into what's called these power purchasing agreements,
Yeah.
where they own it, and you get the credits, and then you buy their solar for less. So you still are able to offset, but you don't have that capital outlay. The capital outlay is typically the stumbling block for most communities to increase solar.
So the diagram that showed for Marathon currently, it had one area that was black and everything else was blue. Is the black area where we currently have the
Yes.
panels? It's a very small percentage.
Very small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So here's a random question with this. There's opportunity to save pretty significant amount of money. But I guess I didn't quite totally understand what we would have to lay out before we saved that money.
We don't lay anything out.
We don't lay anything out. All right. Really?
All right. So, there's incentives. There's reasons why developers do what they do. So for the solar panels, for instance, that we own that are on the Marathon roof, we're able to sell what's called SRECs. So the town right now currently gets the revenue from those SRECs. So the developers that are coming in and are doing this, they're getting revenue as well. So they own the panels, they're getting that SREC revenue. We're getting the utility offset. So when you own them, you get both. So right now, that little piece that we get that direct offset on our utility bill, and the town gets to sell the SRECs and gets money into the general fund.
Okay.
So, but by us not putting out that capital outlay, we don't get that revenue. We get the utility offset.
All right.
So yes, there is incentive for developers to do this.
Okay.
I also just want to highlight, because I imagine that when people hear we're looking at solar things, this could come up in the community, that my understanding from you is that the technology is different in how they're being installed, and that the problem that we had years ago with the panels that were installed in the high school, that damaged the roof, that couldn't happen with the way they're being installed now.
That's correct. So the solar panels and solar installations have come a long way since the time that it was installed at the middle school and high school. That installation actually has roof penetrations. This will not have roof penetrations. It's what's called ballasts. So they're weighted onto the roof, and they also work with the roof manufacturer to make sure that the warranty will also be honored at the same time. So they will work together with the roofing contractor. So it is a very different situation than what we have currently at the middle school, high school.
Excellent.
Is it possible to do both of these, to do net metering and expand our solar installation on Marathon, or are they mutually exclusive?
No, I'm looking for both.
Okay.
Ms. Rothermere, how long do you think will be this investigative period?
So the net metering is a build. So this is a company that is looking to get nonprofits, schools, to invest, to, take part and buy these credits. So they're looking for that to be built potentially at the fourth quarter of 19.
Okay.
So, and then the installation on Marathon could take a couple months, because again, they'll do their engineering studies and.
So, when I look at the memo, what you're seeking is permission to investigate.
Permission to negotiate and sign agreements.
I think we need to restate the motion, probably.
I think that's in the motion, yes.
Yeah, I think it does.
So in the memo, it says, I'm looking for authorization to negotiate in good faith for Hopkinton Public Schools for each of these projects.
So what I have in here is the motion to approve the Director of Finance to investigate solar opportunities with solar agencies for solar opportunities for facilities in the Hopkinton School District.
Yeah, the motion is different from the memo. The memo that she submitted is different from what the motion says on the agenda.
So we want to make sure we go with the motion that is in the
memo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that what you're requesting?
Any other,
So on the net metering, this is a new build. Is it a company that has done this before? Is this a common?
It's very common.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, you've probably driven around the state and you see solar farms. That's where these come from.
They work in this kind of arrangement with
Yes.
either nonprofit or private clientele?
Yep, so they'll put solar farms in communities that will allow it, with the zoning and planning within that town, and they look for people that would be off-takers.
I must admit, I was under the impression that this is simply an investigation that you are looking at. So I'm just wondering if we are authorizing that you move forward with some of the work, including the work on Marathon Elementary. I'm not an expert in this space, so I'm just wondering, do we have any kind of a protocol of folks in town who may know this, who are partnering in this?
So the one for Marathon is being proposed by Select, so they are our town partner. They are currently doing our preventive maintenance on the solar panels that currently exist on Marathon. We've signed an agreement with them to do that. So Select has done many, is working with the town on other ones as well. I believe they were involved at, I don't know if it was the firehouse or somewhere else where they're
Sure.
also managing.
Okay. So are we guaranteed to get some benefit out of this in terms of savings?
Yes.
So what are the risks? What are the risks that we don't see, that we don't, especially with the net metering, that we don't currently do? We currently do the other, but we don't currently do net metering. Is there a risk?
So the only thing that would happen is, on a cloudy day where it does not produce as much, you don't get as much solar, which means that we also don't pay for it. So we won't be billed for anything that the solar does not produce. So if it's down, if it's covered by snow, and it's not producing, we're also not being billed.
So we pay our regular rates to NSTAR, and we don't pay that portion to the solar provider. We
Right.
pay a higher percentage to NSTAR.
It just means that our bill would not be reduced
Right.
by the solar, and we would also not pay the solar company.
And they probably can't. I don't know enough about this industry, but the rates are set. So the rates aren't different when you're a solar partner. The standard rates, I mean, they don't, like,
The
make
rate
the
that
rates
comes
high.
from NSTAR is
It's
the rate that comes
right?
from, yes,
Okay.
that doesn't change. Yep, it's a direct offset onto your bill.
And Ms. Rothmick, do you have to go through the planning board by any chance for any of this work?
Other questions down there? Want to make sure Meg's okay down there?
Meg, do you have any questions?
No?
She's good. No, I'm good.
Okay. If that's it for questions and concerns, and I want to correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm seeking a motion for authorization for the Director of Finance to negotiate in good faith for Hopkinton Public Schools for each of the 2 solar projects outlined in the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Jen.
Second.
Second by Amanda, and we'll do a roll call vote again. Start with you, Amanda.
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Yes.
Lena?
Abstain.
And I'm a yes. So that's 4 yes and 1 abstain.
It's just to clarify, I would like to spend more time understanding this.
Okay. Okay, then that brings us, now let's flip back here to the budget transfers, which is also Ms. Rothenrink.
Thank you. So this is pretty much a follow-on to the financial report that I gave to you in December, and where we had, salary adjustments through staff moving, through attrition, and everything that we talked about. This is really kind of cleaning that up and making the budget transfers to reflect the actual of where staff are. So the first 5, 6, 7, and 8 is to clean those up for staff that were moving. And then the budget transfer 9, you'll see that shift between our out-of-district placements in terms of the movement of private to collaborative tuitions. And that's just really based on student needs and where our students are at this time.
Any questions, comments, questions, concerns? Okay. And then, in absent of any comments or questions, I would seek a motion to approve the budget transfers as outlined in the submitted documents in our agenda packet.
So moved.
Motion by Jen, second.
Second.
Second by Mina, and we'll do a roll call, starting with Amanda.
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Jen?
Yes.
Mina?
Yes.
And I am also a yes. So that moves us into old business, and we have item A, School Committee Policy JLB, Financial Assistance. This is a second reading and Dr. Kavanaugh, you're going to present that?
I will.
And yes. I just want to say, I did not, I saw that it went out on the listserv. I did not receive any feedback. I don't know if you did.
None. Okay, no. Yeah, we talked about this in November, and one of the things that's going to be happening very soon is we are going to be going through the whole Chromebook purchasing process. And as we looked at this particular policy, what we realized was that there were a couple of things that were sort of outdated here. So you see that you have a red-lined copy. In that second section where we talk about fee reductions or waivers, the tuition for full-day kindergarten was still on there, and that obviously made no sense because we now have free full-day kindergarten for everybody here. But so we left in pre-K tuitions, that's still there, or we added in pre-K kindergarten. But the other thing that we have taken out of there is financial assistance or fee reductions for the one-to-one laptop user program. And that's not needed any longer because right now what we will do is any student that doesn't have one or can't afford one, we just give them a loan for the year. And the kid just, takes it, comes and goes with it, and it's just very easy. So those are the two things that are relevant to now, and removal of one outdated item.
And then, if I recall correctly, this also, Denise Hildreth took a look at this as well, is that?
She did. That's what I think kept us from approving this last time, yes. And typically, we wouldn't be looking at policy during budget season, but because Chromebook and laptop is coming up, it's on the horizon,
Sure.
there was a need to expedite this.
Any questions,
housekeeping.
comments? I know you guys, your policy group has been so proactive.
Excuse
Very
me.
quiet the last several
Yes.
meetings, but we'll get
I
loud
don't
again.
think you've been quiet in the background, though. I'm gonna guess you guys have been continuing to move forward. Okay. Then if nobody has any questions or comments on the policy, I think we are ready to actually approve it. So I would seek a motion to approve, I have to look at the letters to make sure I get this right, motion to approve policy, school committee policy JLB, financial assistance. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Amanda, a second.
Second.
Second by Mina, and we'll do a roll call, starting with Amanda.
Aye.
Meg?
Aye.
Jen?
Yes.
Yes.
And I am also a yes. So that passes, and that brings us down to our next opportunity for public comment. Our public is very lacking here. Hopefully people are able to tune in from home, though. So that brings us then down to items by consensus.
Yes, so as superintendent, I recommend that the school committee vote to approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mina, a second.
Second.
Second by Jen, and we'll do a roll call. Amanda?
Aye.
I think we may have lost
I
Meg.
think we lost Meg.
Okay, so we've got Amanda.
She's gone.
Jen?
Yes.
Mina?
Yes.
And I am also a yes, so the items by consensus have passed. And I would, I guess at this point, seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Jen.
Second.
Second by Mina, and since we no longer have remote participation, we can do a simple, all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. So we are adjourned at 8:15 PM, and we will look forward to our next meeting next Thursday, January 10th, 2019, at 7 PM here in the high school library, when we will have our public hearing on the budget. Thank you all, and have a good night.